So welcome everybody, and thank you for being here at Built by Women. This is the very first joint program of ULI Pittsburgh and AIA Pittsburgh, and we're really excited to be able to work together on this important topic. I am Michelle Fonzo, the Executive Director of AIA Pittsburgh.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jamie Pasquinelli, District Manager for ULI Pittsburgh. And it was definitely a pleasure working with Michelle and AIA on this program. And we hope to partner again really soon. I would like to next introduce ULI Pittsburgh's Women's Leadership Initiative Chair, Dusty Kirk. Dusty has believed in this program and has been a fantastic leader during this planning and within WLI. So Dusty, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Jamie and Michelle. On behalf of the Women's Leadership Initiative of ULI and AIA, I am so excited that you are here for our program, Built by Women, Redefining Our Professional Landscape. This has been germinating for quite some time, and both groups have been working on it for, I'd say, about a year now. So I'm so glad that it's come together. It's a collaboration of women who are, while we know they're in classrooms at colleges and hired as design and real estate professionals, often women are still not partners in their organizations. They're not in the front lines leading design, development, and real estate thought processes. So women cannot break that glass ceiling in these professions if they're in the back room. So our community, our cities, our neighborhoods are not the same. They are poorer for the lack of women's contributions to our built landscape. And their voices and ideas are being missed. So our built environment would be different if they were being heard. So today we're going to explore that. And we hope the next time that you will invite one of your male colleagues to join you, because this is the first of a two-part series that we hope to put on in the spring. So, my late husband was a big supporter of women, and he always told me long before Hamilton that you have to be in the room. So we need to have women in the room, in those glass offices at the corners, and having their voice in our future design and development. So I'm going to introduce Valentina Vavasis. And she's one of our speakers. And then Michelle, I'll turn it back to you. But Valentina is an independent consultant with over 30 years of experience in real estate and community development. She has the unique perspective of someone who's worked across fields of architecture, finance, and urban development. She's worked with nonprofits and for-profits. And right now she's currently redeveloping a small industrial building in Bloomfield for use as artistic workspace. So she's special faculty at Carnegie Mellon University, instructing undergraduate and graduate students from various majors in real estate, land development, and land use. She's co-leading the Architecture's Race and Inclusion Initiative. So it's so important to have her with us today. So I'm going to turn it back to Michelle and Jamie.
Great. I'm going to introduce our other speaker today too, which is Erica Cochran-Hameen. So in addition to being an associate AIA member, she's also a member of NOMA, the National Organization for Minority Architects. She's an architectural designer and assistant professor at Carnegie Mellon University. She serves as co-director of the Center for Building Performance and Diagnostics and is track chair of the Doctor of Professional Practice program and the Architecture, Engineering, and Construction Management PhD program. And this is not all of her bio, this is just the highlights. She has designed over 50 facilities and holds multiple honors, including the Pittsburgh Courier Woman of Excellence Award and an AIA Award for diversity recognition for the U-Dream program at CMU. And for those not familiar with the U-Dream program, it worked to increase diversity in the urban design professions nationally, but in the Pittsburgh region specifically. She currently leads research projects focused on improving indoor environmental quality, energy efficiency, and energy policy. So Erica and Valentina will present for about, I'm guessing 25 or so minutes, and we'll learn quite a bit from them. And then we're going to take this whole group and divide us into, depending on how many are here by then, 3 or 4 breakout groups in which we can delve deeper into these topics that they've raised and other issues around women and the built environment. And then we will come back into plenary for about 10 minutes at the end and share our takeaways. Okay, I'm going to turn this over now to Valentina and Erica.
Okay, I think I speak on behalf of both of us when I'd like to say thank you so much for having us. We're really honored to be part of this event. And Erica and I work together quite a bit, so we're already, so we're going to do our presentation together. So Erica, let's go forward. First, we're going to just give you some quick introductions of some of the work we've done. Then we have a ton of statistics, so we're not going to belabor it too much, but we'll race through them. We just want to remind everybody that despite all the progress you might feel that women have made in the real estate and building industry, there's still a long way to go. And then at the end, we want to share with you sort of our personal thoughts and advice about sort of some of the conclusions we've reached as women in our careers. I just wanted to also note that our presentation is referring to men and women, but we're not trying to exclude non-binary people. Most of the research, of course, is just about men and women in the old-fashioned sense. So Erica, could you go forward? Okay, I'm not going to spend much time on this, but I just wanted to show you on the left is the building I'm currently working on, which is a rehab in Bloomfield of a dumpy old building that I'm turning into below market artist's workspace. I'm not trying to get rich off this project. I'm trying to provide sort of something that is useful, which is a space that is affordable and beautiful and create a nice office for myself. You know that I'm at Carnegie Mellon, and then I do a ton of consulting. And this is something I just finished recently working with Studio for Spatial Practice, which is a woman-owned business, and Ariam Ford Consulting, which is a woman-owned business. We finished a 5-year affordable housing plan in the North Side. I do want to just say as an aside, because this is important to me for this occasion, that when I was in grad school, I have a degree in architecture and an MBA in real estate and finance. When I was getting my MBA, I got a fellowship from the ULI, and that made a big difference for me on my tuition. So I've always been a ULI fan. So that's all for me. Erica?
Thank you. And so I look at my professional life as 2 buckets. There's my built work and my academic work. And so my built work, I practiced in New York and Connecticut for a number of years, and most of my work is public sector work. So it's schools and libraries and train stations and churches. And these are just some images of the type of work that I've done, which includes new construction, renovation, upgrades to modernize buildings for efficiency, but also historical restoration projects and building additions, because those of you who know New York, we are out of space in some areas. So we, add floors right on top of a building. And then my professional work fits in a couple of buckets. There's the work that I do with K through 12 schools. And this is trying to increase, specifically getting an increase in women and underrepresented minorities to come into STEM fields. And then also to investigate indoor environmental quality in our K through 12 schools, which has there's a lot to say about that, but just trying to make better environments for our educational schools and kids, because they don't have a choice of where they go to school. And then looking at building level and portfolio analytics. So doing data analytics and statistics towards improving efficiency in buildings and improving the occupant comfort and health and productivity in buildings, and looking at ways we can also visualize that data. And then this is a shot from a meeting I did. And I will say all my White House work was the Obama White House, none under the current guy. But during the Obama years, I did do some work with helping with his climate action plan, with helping cities across the country have better access to data so that they could use that data to have better informed energy efficiency decisions. So Valentina, I think this one's you.
Yes. So one thing I wanted to say is that it's been very obvious to me that things have changed over generations. So I'm 55, and I just wanted to say that one of the things that when I started out, one of the things that you did as a woman was kind of pretend that you had no personal life or no personal perspective, because one, nobody was interested, and two, it was sort of considered somehow too feminine. So, but what happened with me is that when I had my child, I became a consultant, and that was specifically so I could have more flexibility in my life. And I've been really happy for that, but I have not been in corporate life. And one thing you'll see in our statistics is that women seem to be tending towards smaller firms, and there may be some connection there. And also that, now that we're digging deeper into race and diversity and inclusion, it's clear that people's backgrounds are important to understand as part of understanding them as a professional person. Erica? So our industry statistics, we're going to kind of rip through them. Erica is going to do architecture. I'm going to do some other real estate areas, but I'm going to tell you in advance what you're going to see consistently. So in all of these fields, you will see a low representation of women, period. You will also see a low representation of women specifically in leadership positions. So the question there is, why are we going from half women in school to 1/4 women in leadership positions? We continue to have a pay gap between men and women in the same jobs in almost every field. And that your personal life does in fact matter, especially if you're trying to be a parent or have any outside obligations like taking care of elderly parents. And I did not put in this slide, but we will talk a little bit also about racial disparities, which are also huge in our profession. Erica?
So, some statistics, and we won't belabor them because we want to try to look for also solutions for them. But, something that's really interesting is that 45% of your architecture graduates are women. But then if you start to look at what happens after graduation, 39% of the aspiring architects are women, 35% of associate AIA members are women, 25% in the profession are women, 18% of AIA members are women, and 17% of principals and partners in AIA firms are women. And so even though close to half of graduating classes are beginning with women, by the time we get to other levels of management in the profession, that number drops off tremendously. And then also one of the things that just looking at some of the similarities and things that what happens with people of color as well as with women is just the sheer numbers. So this is for Pittsburgh. And so goodness, this is looking weird on one screen and not the other one. But in the city of Pittsburgh, 1.5% of the licensed architects are Black men, 0.3% are Black women. The Hispanic has a negative number because I think it was like the one or two that we had, we lost. And then what's blurred out is that 8% for Asian. And so this shows that, we have some ways to go in terms of getting more women and people of color into the field of architecture. And so in 2016, women accounted for 36% of newly licensed architects and 42% of the ARE candidates. And then while diversity is improving, it's a slower pace. So as comparison, 15% of new architects and 30% of exam candidates identified as non-white. You know, I showed the Pittsburgh number first, but if we were going to look at things on a national scale, it's quite similar. 3% of the architects nationally are Black, 15% Asian, less than 1% Hispanic or Latino, and then African-American women are at 0.3%, which interesting enough is actually up because it was at 0.2% just a couple of years ago. And then for those with a PhD in architecture, I think it's 0.005%. So we haven't even gotten to 100% yet, but we'll get there. In terms of how degrees are granted, this one is looking at things by race to look at the proportions of what's happening with bachelor degrees. Things start to change when we look into graduate degrees at the master's and the doctoral level. And you'll notice one of the things that's happening is that there's a large increase in terms of non-Americans that are achieving the PhDs in architecture. So now if you remember what the students look like, let's now say, okay, what do the faculty look like? And so one of the things that you can see is that the faculty is not mirroring the students that they're teaching. And so even though we have a huge number of the Asian population achieving graduate degrees, they're not always in the faculty for any race. But then if we say, okay, well, what about women? What's happening with women? And I have the national number as well as Carnegie Mellon's number. And so one thing that I want to point out with this is not just architecture. What I've done now is I'm actually switching from architecture to all of the majors of things that women go into. And one of the reasons for that is that the architecture number is so small, we wouldn't even be able to have a nice graphics for it. So if we just look at sort of your top universities in America, what's happening with women, what's happening with underrepresented minorities, and who are the Carnegie Mellon peers? So who are the top 30 universities across the country? And one of the things you can see is that it's only 35% of your tenure track faculty are women and 7.5% underrepresented minorities. And Carnegie Mellon, out of the top 30, we are ranked 25 in terms of our representation. So now again, just think about when you used to go to school, half of people born are women, about half of people graduating from college are women, but only a little more than a quarter of the tenure track faculty at Carnegie Mellon are women, and then 4% underrepresented minority. And so just factoring in, what happens after the doctorate degrees are achieved, or those master's degrees, or people graduate, we're not necessarily staying in the profession. This is specifically what's happening with regard to CMU. We'd love to say that things are getting better. Unfortunately, they're not right now. Carnegie Mellon is actually losing underrepresented minority faculty at a faster rate than being hired. So our numbers that I just showed you are actually getting worse and worse every year. And then for women, it should be getting better, you would think. And at least it's not getting worse, but it's pretty much just kind of staying the same. And so, we really, if we're trying to make some projections, we want to see this go up. We want to see more women and more people of color becoming and getting into faculty and becoming managers and principals at firm. But we're sort of at this like steady, nothing's really changing. So Valentina, I'll hand this one.
Okay. So when we're talking about salaries, female and minority architects and designers consistently, earn lower salaries than their white male peers and are less likely to hold positions of leadership. Mothers is particularly lose out. And I think, going back to the personal thing, you'll see that motherhood's in fact kind of a big factor here. And firms are not, a lot of architecture firms are not following best practices or just starting to learn about best practices regarding equity. Motherhood. So more male architects are parents than women. And that is thought to be because maybe women, when they become mothers, they're leaving the field or changing fields. Of all architects that are parents, 44% of women are primary caregivers, while only 5% of men are primary caregivers. So the men have the opportunity to focus entirely on their career. And also women need more official validation. So they need licensure. Eric and I have discussed this before, that when you're presenting to a group of men or students, it's really important that you always state your credentials, because you need to validate yourself in a way that men don't necessarily need to do. So licensure is important in architecture, and sometimes that happens at the same moment that you might want to start a family. Okay, so sexual harassment and discrimination, 72% of women worldwide, this is worldwide, have said that they experience sexual discrimination, harassment, or victimization during their career in architecture. And one thing that's been cracking me up a lot over all the diversity training we have is that we have constant training on implicit bias, but we never have training on explicit bias. I mean, explicit bias is so obvious that why we have to pretend that this is some psychological trick that is, you know, somehow confusing us is kind of crazy to me. Continue. Okay, so what about real estate? So we know that real estate obviously has a lot of jobs, so we're not going to go through each job, but we have developers, we have attorneys, we have brokers, we have people in construction, we have bankers and lenders, we have property managers, and we have educators. Can you continue, please? The ULI did a great survey in 2015 about women in real estate, and they learned that of ULI members, 25% are women, but only 14% are CEOs. And of the CEOs, 93% are in firms of 100 or smaller. So women are tending to lead smaller organizations. Continue, please. These are the levels of leadership positions within all these various fields. They refer to this thing called C-level, which C-level is right before the CEO. It's the CFO, the COO, the Chief Operating Officer, the Chief Financial Officer. So this shows you the percentages of leadership positions in all these fields, which obviously are extremely low, ranging from 19 to 0.3%. This is women. This is gender income disparities. This is pretty shocking in my opinion. This is from the Commercial Real Estate Women Network. It shows you the differential between men and women. The men are blue and the women are red. And you can see, like in brokers, there's an extreme variation of men versus women. Developers, all of these fields have disparities in salary. Women in construction, I don't need to tell you that there aren't that many women in construction. 2.5% of tradespeople are women. Most of the women in construction are in the office, and only 14% are in staff executive positions. Continue. And I didn't do statistics on diversity in real estate, but I will tell you that it's awful. And these are just a spattering of articles that have come forth in this last year during the time that people are focusing on diversity. Continue. NAP is the Commercial Real Estate Development Association, and this is their front page, the picture of diversity scholarship. So they seem to be aware of the problem and they're working on it. Continue. Okay, so societal context. So what we just wanted to say here is that, you know, okay, so now we know all this. So is this unique to our field? Of course not. It's not unique to our field at all. So equal pay for equal work has been, I mean, the fact that we still aren't there is really ridiculous. Equity and societal value of jobs. Michelle Fonzo pointed out an interesting article to us in the New York Times about how we value different types of work and how some work, which could be construed to be very similar to work that men do, some women's work, is valued at less just as in pay. And then if you look at who's controlling our country, how many US presidents have we had that are women? How many senators? How many CEOs of Fortune 500 companies? We do not have employee childcare, despite the fact that COVID has basically driven us all insane from a childcare standpoint. There has been no national discussion at all about national childcare, employer childcare. It's basically every woman for herself, plus the schools trying to be the daycare centers of America. Violence and harassment against women, of course, is still a huge problem, racial discrimination, et cetera. So one point of this is just to make the obvious point that, you know, having money and control and power is actually important for women if women want to advance. And, you know, as long as the people who are controlling the stock market and controlling the government are mostly white men, then that is whose interests will be served. Continue. So these are professional recommendations. We have 3 groups of them, and these are compiled from all kinds of sources, but these are, so we're going to just first, this is sort of the end of our presentation. So first, we're just going to go through professional recommendations that are from various organizations and ourselves. And then we're going to finish with our own personal recommendations, which are quite a bit different. So Erica, do you want to take this one?
Sure. And so, you know, one of the big things is to provide mentors. Very important, especially when if you can think about all of the numbers and statistics that we just looked at, it becomes very important to provide mentors so that women can not only get into the workforce, but remain in the workforce and then move up in the workforce, and having someone whose goal it is to help us succeed. Career coaches are another great avenue because they're people who aren't necessarily affiliated with your university or your work, your job, your organization, and they're specifically trained to coach you on how to do better, and they can help you with different techniques to help advance your career. Improving networking opportunities. We all know a lot of deals happen by conversations. And so if you don't have a network that can help facilitate you advancing in your career, then it also provides less opportunities in the future for you. Increasing that K through 12 pipeline, we can't just think about what's happening at college or looking at only those who've graduated from college. We have to think about what happens from when you're 5 years old, so that we can get girls interested in careers and start mentoring them from 5 years old, and so that they're prepared when they arrive in college and into the profession. Increase in diversity outreach methods. The same ones that we've been using aren't enough. We're going to have to increase the number and then also diversify how we outreach to people, and thinking, you know what, maybe this is not the appropriate outreach method to hit and attract an 8-year-old girl, or are these the right outreach methods to find people who might be leaders in your organization? Which leads to the last one, which is partnering with organizations of shared interests. And so, you know, we have AIA and ULI here together, we have a shared interest, but there are other organizations that maybe don't even have to do with the built environment or our STEM or our field directly, but they have a shared interest in improving things within their organization. And so being able to dovetail our goals together will help us be able to achieve a lot more. Should we both do this one? Do you want to tag team this one, Valentina?
Okay. Improving hiring practices and creating uniform evaluation criteria. The amount of biases that you see in hiring are really incredible. So to the extent that you can make it more even, and even proactively seeking out diverse candidates is a good idea. We have a diversity officer at CMU who helps us with job descriptions to look for bias language. For example, we learned that the words teacher, the words educator, and the words professor have different appeal to different genders. Provide credential programs for mid-career professionals. So what happens if you're out of the workforce for 5 years and you want to get back in? What do you need to do to get up to speed? Pay women equally. That's kind of obvious, but we're not making progress there. Provide transparency about how people are promoted. A lot of times I hear stories of people, especially in architecture, being told that they're too quiet. And so we'll talk about that in a minute. And evaluate promotion criteria for equity. So are you promoting people equitably?
And you know, along with that is also looking at what the criteria for equity is. There are sometimes, if people say, well, here's my checklist of how I do promotions, there are other tasks. There's a lot of tasks in organizations that tend to be women-dominated tasks. And many times those tasks are not in the criteria for promotion. And so then we're doing work and we're doing good work to help the organization, but some of the women are gender specific tasks don't make it into the criteria for evaluating in terms of getting a promotion. And so really looking at what your criteria is in the task and whether you only have like male specific or male gender related tasks as a promotion criteria. So our last one, and I think this is, we've been talking about this. So this is something Valentina and we should just both talk about these because I think they're just so important. And your first one is an inclusive culture. What is the culture or the environment of the organization? It's not just saying, oh, I hired a woman and she's here, and the culture is not inclusive, it's not inviting, and it's not a comfortable place to be. And one of the things that we've seen in different exit interviews is that sometimes people leave because the culture of the organization did not make them feel included. So therefore they'll move over to another organization.
And I want to comment on that because we had a CMU graduate who was an African-American alum woman who said that in her architecture firm, all they talked about was hockey all day long. And she felt very excluded because she doesn't know about hockey, nor does she care about hockey. So that's like a very small example of a cultural thing.
But a super important one. And then when we think about the next thing, are personal and virtual resources. So you say, well, we're having a career fair, or we're having a session where you can meet with coaches to help with your career. But what time are you providing those? What day of week? And so being flexible and not having all of your resources only at lunchtime on a Wednesday or only at 5 p.m. on a Friday. I know from a personal standpoint, it used to always annoy me whenever our department would hold things at the exact time they knew daycare was closing. And I'm like, I told y'all I have to run to daycare and I'll be back. And so, it's the CMU daycare, it closes at the same time, but yet and still we hold events at the time when all the moms have to run over to daycare to pick up their kids. And then they're like, none of y'all are here at this event. We're like, we told y'all why we're not here at this event. So just thinking about the time of when things occur. Workplace flexibility and family leave is such a huge thing. It's, when we have families, there's taking care of parents, there's taking care of your child, taking care of yourself, and also other aspects of medical things that happen with women that are not covered by family leave. And so that makes it very difficult for women to stay in the profession.
And for the younger women, you might say to yourself, well, this is ridiculous. Why are women doing all the childcare and the housework anyway? And why are women taking care of the elderly parents? So that in itself is a question. And if you're fortunate, you have a partner, if you're with a man who is doing his share. But I'm going to tell you that if you look at the statistics, and we didn't show those, there's ample evidence that women are still doing all the childcare, most of the housekeeping, most of the cooking, most of the elderly care. And in firms, they tend to do things that are good for the community. And those are examples of things that may not be recognized in promotion criteria.
And there was a Times article that talked about that most men feel like they're being equal in terms of housework and childcare. And then when the woman was asked the same question, it was like, it's not equal, I'm doing it all. And so there's this perception that they're doing things on a 50-50, but when asked of the women, they completely deny that. And I would be one of those women that's in that boat of like, it's not 50-50. So childcare resources are so important. Just as a personal example, CMU, I keep talking about CMU, not meaning to throw them under the bus, but CMU, I think, is a representative of a lot of organizations across America where your employers, what are the resources for childcare? We have a list at CMU for a wait list for on-campus daycare that is years long. And people go on the wait list when they start trying to have a child. And so if your goal is to recruit women to your organization. But then when you get here, it's like, oh, well, we don't actually have childcare for your kids. We just wanted you here at our organization, but I'm not gonna, but it's, you know, everyone for themselves to figure out what you're gonna do with your kids while you show up for work. And then physical environmental resources for nursing mothers. It's really, you know, it's a number of things. It's thinking about what's the environment you've created for whether you can pump at work. Are you saying that you're going to have 5-hour-long meetings with no breaks in them? I remember being in meetings that would go for 4 and 5 hours, and they'd say, okay, let's take a 2-minute bathroom break. And I'm like, no, I can't do everything I need to do in 2 minutes. You guys can run and do that in 2 minutes. I need more time than 2 minutes for what I need to do. And this is when I was nursing, and I demanded that our breaks be 20 minutes because I needed that time. And environmental resources, I actually have had to pump in a closet, like an actual coat closet, because that was the only space that was available at the meeting. That was a 5-hour-long meeting. So
when my daughter was a baby, I remember being on a business trip and pumping in airport bathrooms. So, you know, it's like, really? So anyway, all right. So let's.
Airport bathrooms, I know, buses, bathrooms on the airplane. I mean, just so many places. And then what does the environment look like? UC Berkeley has beautiful nursing rooms. It just puts what we have to shame. It's so wonderful and amazing. Gensler has some beautiful nursing rooms. I had this idea of creating a blog where I would post the nursing rooms of the good ones and the bad ones, like, and just have it up there. All right, should we go with a recommendation?
And I notice in the chat, people are talking about learning about sports. I will say that the two things that I have spent a lot of time learning about for dealing with contractors is sports and hunting. And I had on a project I was working on, they all announced to me, all the contractors, that they would not be coming to work for the next 4 Mondays because they would be at their hunting camps. So, you know, this is part of what you're dealing with. So here's my personal recommendations, and then we'll wrap up. One is to keep your sense of humor. You really have to laugh because otherwise you're going to cry. Don't try to do it all. I have seen so many women who, when they reach my age, if they have a high-powered career and possibly children, they end up with an autoimmune disorder or some kind of physical problem because they put their health last. So the health needs to not be last. Gain skills and assert them. You need to talk. Even if I have noticed in meetings that men will, all they do is try to get the floor. They spend all their time trying to seize the floor. And so you need to talk, even if you don't have anything to add that's original. It's important to always be known that you are present and you have things to say. You have to face reality, no matter how much. I have a friend who's always feeling very negative because life is so unfair. And I feel like you can spend your whole life waiting life to be fair, but it's not going to happen. So you got to just accept that and do your best. And then the last one is particularly to me. I do a lot of work with money. And, you know, money, a lot of women, well, a lot of men really care a lot about money. And so I feel like there are times when women abdicate the money stuff to the men when they need to really seize the money. And that includes budgeting on projects. That includes your personal finances. You know, women from my mother's generation, a lot of times they had no idea where the money was or what the money was because their husbands were taking care of it. You need to know about money. And, you know, one of the things that really ticked me off throughout my career, one of my continuing problems is men who dismiss my knowledge of finance, which is equal to theirs at least, because I'm a woman, and that just drives me freaking crazy. So that's my recommendations. Erica?
Okay, and so mine, don't sweat the small stuff. That's one of my big ones. Especially I've learned that during COVID, as I'm sitting there holding a child because my nanny had tested positive and I'm giving a presentation and he's having a tantrum. Like, don't sweat the small stuff because something else is going to happen that's going to be even bigger. And like Valentina said, you got to just keep your sense of humor and keep it going because there's always going to be something else. Pick your battles. Stuff is going to happen. You can't fight over everything. Or as Valentina said, you're going to burn yourself out. And so, you know, you can't fight the battle for every tiny little thing that happens. Be strategic in which ones you're going to fight and work on. it's okay, and more than just okay, it's recommended. Ask for help. Find a partner, ask for help. Don't be afraid to do it. Just reach out. It's not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of being smart and strategic, which leads to establish priorities and reassess them periodically. What may be your priority today, next week something can change in your family or your life or your organization, and you need to reassess, is this really what's important? I reassess my priorities because things change in your life, and you have to say, you know what, that's no longer a priority, and I'm gonna and then be okay with saying that is not my priority anymore, and this is why I'm focusing on this. And one of those priorities needs to be take time for yourself. And my last one is, I say, delightful beverages in the house. For me, that's wine, red wine in particular. But I don't want to tell everyone to have a case of wine in the house, because some of you may prefer beer or fruit juice, but some sort of delightful beverage to your choosing. Make sure you have lots of it in the house. And so, I always want to end also with just a nice picture. This is actually our NOMA president, and this is when she was maybe 10 years ago, when she was younger, and she was working with these wonderful, delightful high school students to try to get them excited about architecture. And so even though we showed all these dire statistics, I wanted to end on a happy image, because here's a woman who had a mentor, moved up in the world, is now a firm owner and president, and married, and has a baby on the way. And so it can be done. We just have to keep that sense of humor and beverages in our house. That's it.
Yes. So thank you. And we're going to be part of the breakout room. So Michelle will explain that. Thank you for your time, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much for putting all those thoughts together and sharing them with us. It's a wonderful kind of overview and launch of what we're hoping is going to be a really robust discussion with the time that we have left today. So folks can turn their cameras back on if if you'd like to be seen. We have two things. One is, if you have a question that is very specific to this presentation that can't wait for the breakout room, we have a couple minutes, like literally 5, that we can give to questions right now. But I encourage most questions to be taken into the breakout rooms that we're about to go into, where you can have a lot more robust discussion with others. I'm going to ask Valentina or Erica to stop sharing your screen, just so I can see more faces, and I can determine if there's like a burning question that somebody wants to ask right now around the screen. And you can also type your question in the chat, because sometimes with so many people, I'll miss a hand raising. We are about to go into 4 breakout rooms, and each breakout room will have a moderator. So Erica and Valentina are 2 of those moderators. And we also have Melissa Simonetti and Kirsten Compitello. So in your breakout room, one of these people will give you, direction to help focus the conversation. A big piece of this second part of today is to look for solutions, right? To understand the problem, which Valentina and Erica have, in some ways given us a context. I know there's so much more we could talk about, but to also look for, now, where do we go from here? How do we move this forward as a community in Western Pennsylvania? So I'm just taking a quick look here. I'm not seeing any questions at this time that are burning. Is that Dusty raising her hand?
Yes, I was putting it in the chat, but it was too long to get into the chat. So I just want to throw it out there, and maybe Valentina and Erica can help us think about it. Everything I'm reading about office end users and developers are that people are going to need less office space because of so many people working from home. So even when people come back, they feel they're going to need less office space. So I think that it is such an opportunity for childcare. And I don't know how much it costs, how much space you need for childcare. But I think that that's something that both of our organizations could investigate and get behind. And I was just throwing that out there as a discussion. So, you know, like Reed Smith has offices in the US in, I don't know, 20 some cities. And if we downsize, how much can I tell them it's going to cost if they want to keep a space for childcare? Just throwing it out there.
Thank you, Dusty.
You mean space for childcare in the office itself? Is that what you're referring to, or do you mean something different?
I'm saying for employers to provide childcare in their offices, or at least in the building somewhere, you know, like we share a building with PNC, so that it makes it easier for women to go to work, to work longer hours, to take those breaks, to go see their child if they need to. That's what I was referring to.
That's a really good topic to bring into the breakout rooms, because I want to give people enough time to really chat. So as I said, we have moderators. There are 3 framing questions that we have posed. I put them in the chat. The moderators already know these questions to help shape the discussion, but obviously the discussion can go where the group, right, takes it. The last 10 minutes of today, we'll come back together and we'll share our main takeaways from each group, which will be the, in essence, product of this day's event. And we will use the conversations we have heard today and the takeaways to help shape what we're hoping will be an even larger